Welcome, welcome, welcome to Dank Times Danker Thoughts, episode 95, with me, Angelo Grosso. And before we talk about Angelo's personal life here, we just had Valentines Day. It was a hectic day. It was a wild weekend. I'll get all to it. But before we dive into what's making Angelo tick, let's talk about what the hell is happening in Canada with this supposed far-right, racist, homophobic, misogynistic trucker convoy that's ruining the economies of all the worlds because they're not vaccinated. Which, oh boy, where do I begin on this? If you see the same rhetoric basically being shared amongst all mass media, all of the quote-unquote elites, whatever you want to call it. I mean, you know what? Words have lost all their meanings. Elites, far left, far right, conservative, liberal, progressive, anti-vax, terrorist. I mean, some of these words don't even mean anything anymore. They get corrupted. Just like these movements, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, they all start off with the love of the people, empathy, compassion, wanting to do good protests, civil protests. But like anything in life, you get one or two people to go against decency, the law, go against the actual message of whatever group or march or ideological push that you're trying to do. They go against that and ruin it for everybody. That's now why you hear about Black Lives Matter, and a lot of people's instant reaction is to roll their eyes. Same thing with the Me Too. Same thing whenever they hear about vaccine mandates, mask mandates. The term mandate has become something that people will end up dying on a hill on. It's crazy to me. And so I kept hearing about this trucker convoy, and I was hearing all of the derogatory words being thrown at these truckers. And then I would look at Fox News or other conservative media markets out there, and they're calling them heroes, freedom fighters. And so you're like, okay, I'm guessing that Fox News is wrong, MSNBC is wrong, everyone is wrong, so let's try to meet in the middle and find out what exactly is happening in Canada, between Canada and the US border, that is spreading all over the world. I mean, there is protests happening everywhere now that are holding up their fists in solidarity with this supposed far-right, radical, racist, misogynistic, anti-vax, whatever, truckers in Canada. And so after doing some research and going through a couple different sources, I think I have a general understanding of what's actually happening. So let's dive into it. All right, so this is from the Wall Street Journal. What is the Freedom Convoy? And this is updated every day, it looks like. Since late January, downtown Ottawa has served as a parking lot for hundreds of heavy-duty trucks, pickup trucks, and other vehicles operated by individuals who say they are fed up with the social restrictions and vaccine mandates meant to contain the spread of COVID-19. Some of the vehicles involved in the Ottawa protests are adorned with Canadian flags, along with signs and slogans demanding that rights under the country's constitution be restored, among them the right to decline to get vaccinated for COVID-19, and that rules be abolished requiring vaccinations to either work, travel, or eat at a local pub. In Ottawa, the convoy, organized under the Freedom Convoy 2022, has clogged up traffic in the city's core, forced some businesses to shut their doors, and disrupted residents' daily lives. Tens of thousands of people have gathered near the country's parliament on consecutive weekends to show their support. Protesters also disrupted most U.S.-Canada traffic at Detroit's Ambassador Bridge starting on February 7th. The blockade caused some automakers and auto part manufacturers, especially on the Canadian side, to curtail production and send some employees home because parts couldn't be delivered. On February 13th, Canadian police arrested between 25 and 30 protesters and towed about a dozen vehicles in an effort to clear access to the bridge. Later the same day, the bridge reopened to commercial and passenger traffic. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson has requested an additional 1,800 law enforcement officers from the Canadian government to help quell the insurrection. See, again, there's another word that has lost all meaning, insurrection. Ottawa Police Force employs 1,200 officers. We must do everything in our power to take back the streets of Ottawa. On February 14th, Mr. Trudeau argued that national security was now at risk. took the extraordinary step of invoking temporary emergency powers available under national security legislation. The goal, he said, was to end the trucker-led Ottawa demonstration and protect U.S.-Canada border crossings. We cannot and will not allow illegal and dangerous activities to continue. However, we aren't going anywhere. We are here to fight for our freedom, our rights, our ability to choose whether we want to do something or not, said Sean Lawyer, a tradesman who drove about 300 miles from the northern Ontario town of Sudbury to participate in the protest. We will be heard. You can't ignore this. So, what is the Freedom Convoy and why are people protesting in Canada? A small team of Western Canadian truckers, family members, and friends decided in mid-January to launch the protest with truckers and supporters converging in the capital in a peaceful protest. The group said the number of trucks headed to Ottawa was around 50,000. Police said on February 10th that the number of vehicles in the area was almost 400. So that's a little difference there. The group's goal is to compel all levels of government in Canada to repeal vaccine mandates, including one that applied to truckers as of January 15th, and other social restrictions, such as a ban on unvaccinated people from going into restaurants, bars, and gyms. Freedom is constantly at war with those who want to limit it and must be defended, said the statement from the Freedom Convoy 2022 Facebook page. I love that we're referencing Facebook page quotes. Jesus Christ. Nice job, Washington Post. Wait, this is Washington Journal. My bad. Same deal. A spokeswoman and fundraiser for the group, Tamara Litch, said demonstrators would not stay a day longer than necessary. Our departure will be based on the Prime Minister doing what is right. Mr. Trudeau's Liberal government implemented vaccine mandates affecting truckers, both Canadian and the U.S., require truckers to be fully vaccinated into their countries and would-be travelers on flights or originating in Canada on long-distance passenger rail service. So how is the government and the police responding to this protest? Mr. Trudeau took one of the most extraordinary steps possible, invoking measures in the National Emergencies Act. This legislation is available to governments to address emergencies dealing with public health, public order, and international threats to sovereignty. It is rarely used. In a cabinet order published February 15th, the government said the protests in downtown Ottawa and at border crossing constitute a public order emergency because of the threat of violence and unrest, as well as a disruption caused to the supply chain network and two-way trade with the U.S. Well, I'll get into that later. According to the order, the government would ban protests that police believe would lead to unlawful activity. Let me read that again. According to this order, the government would ban protests that police believe would lead to unlawful activity. Not something you want to have in a democracy, outlawing protests based on what the police think. It would also prohibit gatherings near critical infrastructures, such as border crossings, and allow authorities to commandeer tow trucks to help police remove demonstrators' vehicles. Again, these aren't things you want to see in a democracy these days. There are also provisions covering financial transactions in an effort to target protesters' cash. That sounds borderline theft. For instance, crowdfunding websites and their payment processors are now obligated under the National Emergency Order to report donations they deem suspicious to finance intelligence authorities. Jesus Christ, they're treating these trucker convoys almost like they're Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Some politicians, civil rights organizations, and lawyers criticized Trudeau's government's use of the emergency powers as too far-reaching given the circumstances, and I would personally agree. Wesley Wark, a prominent national security expert and senior fellow with the Canadian-based Centers for International Governance Innovation, disagreed. This is not martial law. This is a surgical instrument to give police at the local level certain tools. Yeah, right. Ottawa police escalated efforts to remove the protesters on February 16th by visiting hundreds of heavy-duty trucks and other vehicles parked downtown and in front of the National Legislature to deliver notices demanding demonstrators leave immediately or face arrests and criminal charges. You leave the area now, the notice from Ottawa police said. As of February 15th, Ottawa police said they filed 33 criminal charges, issued 3,000 tickets for alleged violations related to the protests in the capital, such as excessive horn honking, public consumption of alcohol, and the use of fireworks. Not exactly what I would call dangerous, or an insurrection. Police added that 172 criminal offense investigations related to the protests are underway. Police have also confiscated fuel gathered by protesters and warned of arrests for people trying to enter the main demonstration zone with fuel for trucks. Well, the way that the fuel prices are going up, Canada probably needs all the fuel they can. So they're just stealing it from these convoy members. The government of Ontario declared a state of emergency, citing the protests in Ottawa and a blockade at the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit. The Ontario cabinet issued executive orders to establish steep fines for demonstrators who block trade corridors such as highway and airports. The orders also give authorities the power to revoke driver's licenses of protesters who participate in Ottawa and at the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit. Wild. Wild. Who is supporting the Freedom Convoy? 46% of Canadians surveyed suggested they don't necessarily agree with everything the protesters in Ottawa and elsewhere are advocating, but nonetheless are of the view their frustration is legitimate and worthy of sympathy. 54% of Canadians believe the protesters are wrong and don't deserve any sympathy. Angus Reid Institute, another polling organization, said the survey done between February 11th to 13th suggests that over 70% of respondents are more likely to oppose the measures sought by protesters. Early on in the protests, some lawmakers with Canada's main political opposition, the Conservative Party, expressed support for the protesters. On February 9th, the interim leader of the Conservative Party said it was time for the protests to end. Your protests began with truckers and you have grown into an international phenomenon. However, I believe the time has come to take down the barricades, stop the destructive action, and come together. Former President Donald Trump said the convoy was peacefully protesting the harsh policies put forward by Mr. Trudeau, whom he referred to as far-left lunatic, who has destroyed Canada with insane COVID mandates. Ted Cruz tweeted his support for the protesters involving in the convoy. They're defending Canada, America, and they're standing up for freedom. The protest group has raised over $10 million via the crowdfunding website GoFundMe, with proceeds they said to be distributed to protesters to cover the cost of fuel to drive to Ottawa and other expenses such as accommodation and food. On February 4th, GoFundMe shut down the organizers' money-raising drive, adding that it would distribute refunds to the donors. We now have evidence from law enforcement that the previously peaceful demonstration has become an occupation, with police reports of violence and other unlawful activity. Organizers have since shifted to another crowdfunding website, Give, Send, Go. As of February 11th, the protest group has raised more than $8 million. The Ontario government said it had succeeded in getting a court order to freeze monetary donations to the protesters through that website, Give, Send, Go. Wow. And it just keeps exploding all over the world here. We have it being in Montana, Alberta, North Dakota, Manitoba. Oh, this is just between the Canadian-U.S. border here. Well, before I give in to a counterpoint in all this, I got to give the Washington Street Journal a little bit of credit. They told it kind of like it is. They didn't really give too much of an opinion there. But from my perspective, I have not seen any violence in these protests, in the coverage and in the articles that I have read. It's all being blown out of proportion, much like Joe Rogan, much like Trump and Russia, everything, the Covington kids. You could go on and on and on and on. Now, one thing I do respect about these protesters is the protest kind of worked. Just getting it organized is a dream to me in terms of progressive, peaceful protests. If we had this Freedom Convoy's level of organization with the Occupy Wall Street movement, with the George Floyd protests, with the Women's March, well, I will say the Women's March is actually pretty organized and pretty safe overall. And any other kind of protest, if you could have their level of organization, I'm very jealous of that. I wish we could have that here in this country. I have not seen a protest in this country, maybe since the Women's March, that was this organized and kind of well behaved. And this whole idea that they are insurrectionists and terrorists and violent, I think is absurd. And in my American opinion, I do see that the Canadian government overstepped with this Emergency Powers Act. They are treating these people like terrorists. You can either like their opinion and not. I personally am pro-vaccine, but I am anti-mandates. I don't like them. I don't think you can force people into doing things involving their body that they do not want to do, and especially if it's coming from the government and putting a needle into your arm or a pill in your mouth. It's asking a lot in today's society where we are soft, we are cushy, We have no troubles, really, for the mass majority of people. We're just whiny bitches for the most of it. But we have an inflated vision of self, and we think we're more important than we actually are. And this individualism in the West is crippling us. But either way, like it or not, it's a peaceful protest. It shut down one government and also affected the U.S. government. So again, you have to applaud the organization efforts and how they actually got their point across. There was no clashes with police. There was no mass looting. There was no burning of cop cars and burning of businesses. There was no violence escalation. Now I have seen unsubstantiated video accounts of Canadian police actually being more forceful and violent to the protesters, but even by comparison to the U.S. police force, the Canadian police force, I wish we had them. I wish when we hear police brute force in America, we would be given the Canadian police treatment. It's actually quite astounding. But one of my journalist heroes that I hold in very high esteem, Matt Taibbi, wrote a very good article clarifying some things and giving his, much respected in my opinion, his thoughts on this. The Great International Convoy Fiasco. This is on his Substack account. As America puts the Canadian Prime Minister's unmentionables in a vice over a truck protest, it's clearer than ever the world's leaders have forgotten how to govern. The White House issued a statement Friday after Joe Biden chatted with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The two leaders agreed that the actions of the individuals who are obstructing travel and commerce between our two countries are having significant direct impacts on citizens' lives and livelihoods. The Prime Minister promised quick action in enforcing the law, and the President thanked him for steps he and other Canadian authorities are taking to restore the open passage of bridges to the United States. What does this translate into? Biden told Trudeau his nuts will be crushed under a Bradley fighting vehicle if this trucker thing is allowed to screw up the Super Bowl or Biden's State of the Union address. Trudeau's own statement that day came off like the recorded video message of a downed pilot. I've been absolutely clear that using military forces against civilian populations in Canada or any other democracy is something to avoid having to do at all costs. An anxious Trudeau promised to deploy law enforcement in a predictable, progressive approach that would emphasize fines and other punishments, because demonstrators will see the consequences for those continuing to engage in illegal protests are going to be more and more extensive. We are very hopeful that people will choose to leave these protests peacefully. Switching gears a bit, he added, we are a long way from ever having to call in the military. Such a move, he said, would only be a last resort. Wow. We are a long way from ever having to call in the military. Although, of course, we have to be ready for any eventually, but it is not something we are seriously contemplating at this time. Whoa, that speech was clearly designed to convey to protesters that he was under a heavy pressure to call in the airstrike, making the New York Times headline coverings all of this. Trudeau's rejects calls to use military to end protests particularly humorous, and it's disingenuous. Now that the Freedom Convoy is inspiring similar protests not just in the US, but in France, Belgium, hey homies, Australia, New Zealand, and other places, it's clear every Western leader, from Biden to Macron to Trudeau, wants Canada, rather than any of their own, to take the political hit that would ensue from any use of force resolution in the crisis. All of these leaders seem equally to be laboring under the delusion that a decisive enough ass-kicking in the Great White North will make this all go away. Until then, there seems to be no plan in any country that doesn't involve tear gas, truncheons, or getting Facebook to blame troll farms in Bangladesh for stirring up the discord. As for talking to the protesters, that's out of the question. As Politico recently put it, the conspiratorial mindset of the demonstrators mean sitting down with them could legitimize their concern. God forbid we have discourse. Since we can't under any circumstances have that, the only option left is the military, eventually. Or as former Obama Deputy Homeland Security Secretary and CNN analyst Juliette KM, slash the tires, empty the gas tanks, arrest the drivers, and move the trucks. Any sane person should be able to see where any of these ideas would lead. The problem is, we're heading into our third decade of Western leaders embracing not thinking ahead as a core national security concept. It's like these people went to anti-governing school. And he continues, Canadian truckers are reportedly 90% vaccinated. above the country's 78% total, a key detail that has been brazenly ignored by media in both countries, determined to depict these more as anti-vax than anti-mandate protests. That's one thing that I was finding before I even read Matt Taibbi's article here. Yeah, 90% of the truckers protesting are vaccinated. So they're not anti-vax. They're anti-mandate. So come on, you got to tell it like it is. They're looking for a quick resolution. It's lazy governing. And I see this every single day. People can be put into buckets. Things are black and white. You can fix everything by just executing these groups of people, executing these laws, getting rid of these people. Danker, the list goes on and on and on. Instead of looking at it like a connecting the dots to get this beautiful picture, they just want to draw two dots and say any people that don't belong in this dotted line, get the fuck out. It's lazy. If you fire a handful of people from this trucker convoy, or not fire them, but arrest them, the rest will fall. That's not going to happen. It's just lazy. They want all their detractors can be stuffed instead of just treating them like legitimately political actors whose complaints need to be dealt with. And that, you hit the nail on the head there, Matt Taibbi. You need to talk to these people. You can't just push them away. You need to treat them like the legitimate political actors whose complaints need to be dealt with. Now, emboldened, other convoys are now organizing to descend on Washington, D.C. The hashtag Truckers Convoy 2022 already has millions of interactions, and the main Facebook groups have gained 200,000 members in 2 weeks. Again, the organization efforts of this is amazing. It's something to applaud. You may not agree with the truckers. I don't even agree with the truckers for the most part. I agree with the anti-mandate stance, but it's not as simple as that. But I also understand that if I'm a trucker, why should I follow the same guidelines as a waitress in a restaurant? I'm by myself all day. I'm driving across the border. If I get tested once, or if I have the vaccine, or if I have antibodies because I had COVID earlier, why do I have to follow these insane policies? I was reading that one of the mandates is that you have to quarantine yourself after you cross the border. Well, that's insane. If you're a truck driver, that means you're quarantining yourself, weeks and weeks and weeks out of the year. That's crazy. No. They're coming, but it seems like the only thing our thinking classes can think to do in response is mass-produce news stories denouncing everyone involved as neo-Nazi QAnon loons, basically a repeat of the Trump approach that was so successful in basically electing Donald Trump. All our leaders have come up with are strategies of suppression and containment, combinations of policing, surveillance, censorship, and propaganda, and even the propaganda is mostly just mocking. Over and over, we're told the only thing we need to know about the opposition is that it's insane, wrong, and won't get anywhere, which brings us back to the Freedom Convoy. Virtually every news story that's come out about the Canada protests has focused on bad behaviors of individual protesters or polls showing their supposed unpopularity or news linking leaders to QAnon and vaccine skepticism and even Holocaust denial. Editors now routinely make sure that the word convoy is surgically attached in headlines to delegitimize rhetoric, as in the Independence Freedom Convoy push by QAnon, or NBC's As U.S. Trucker Convoy Picks Up Momentum, Foreign Meddling Adds to Fray. Center-left leaders around the world seem more interested now in defending the principles of not listening than in the practical question of amping down tensions, a logistical problem that in this case needs to be solved somehow sooner rather than later. A mass covering of official ears while shouting QAnon Holocaust isn't going to get it done, and sending in the military is pretty much guaranteed to work about as well as it did in the Middle East. What's happening in Canada and other countries seem less about specific demands than about the general principles of being listened to. Leaders like Trudeau could likely make this thing go away if they'd make even a slight gesture towards the idea that legitimate differences of opinion exist on questions like mandates, vaccine passports, surveillance tracking, lockdowns, vaccination of children, and other matters. You don't have to agree with people. Just find a way to look at them without betraying your profound regret they were ever born. The longer this convoy phenomenon goes on, the clearer it becomes that none of the leaders involved knows how to do this. They're not choosing to govern without listening. They just don't know any other way. Oh, Matt Taibbi, again, goddamn hero. But As you can probably guess, my personal opinion on this is this. I don't believe that all of the protesters in Canada and the US border are QAnon, Nazi, sexist, misogynistic, far-right nincompoops. Do I believe some of them are there? Yes. Do I believe they're a fringe group? Yes. Much like during the George Floyd protests, not every single protester was Antifa throwing bricks through small businesses and burning them and making concrete milkshakes and throwing them at police officers. No, that is a fringe group. You cannot let a handful of people define an entire protest or movement or ideology. It's lazy and it's dangerous. I don't think this Canadian convoy thing's going to go anywhere soon because we, like Taibbi said, and I believe in it, I believe his opinion, those in power do not know how to talk to people that have differences of an opinion. Even at the highest, most powerful level in government, there's still division, there's still anger, but most importantly, there is a disconnect between what is real and what is reality. All right, I'll get off my soapbox here. Let's move on to another fun topic, the Russia-Ukraine. Ooh, we just keep jumping from one good story to another. Ukraine shows unity as the West sees no sign of Russian pullback. Well, those are two different things. Ukrainians defied pressure from Moscow with a national show of flag-waving unity Wednesday, while the West warned that it saw no sign of a promised pullback of Russian troops from Ukraine's border despite Kremlin declarations of a withdrawal. While a feared Russian invasion of Ukraine on Wednesday did not materialize, yeah, by the way, all weekend, and actually the end of last week, all you would hear is that it's imminent, Russian invasion's going to happen. I mean, it was like World War III wasn't only going to happen, it was currently happening, and we were all 50 fucked. But thank God for that Super Bowl halftime show, but I'll get right back to that in a minute. While a feared Russian invasion of Ukraine did not materialize, just like I've been saying for weeks now, if not months, the United States and its allies maintain that the threat remains strong, with Europe's security and economic stability in the balance. Russian President Vladimir Putin has signaled he wants a peaceful path out of the crisis, and U.S. President Joe Biden promised that the U.S. would continue to give diplomacy every chance. But he struck a skeptical tone about Moscow's intentions. Biden also insisted that Washington and its allies would not sacrifice basic principles respecting Ukraine sovereignty. Russia has massed about 150,000 troops east, north, and south of Ukraine, according to Western estimates. Well, I need to know, where's that coming from? You can't really believe the Western spies anymore. I don't think the deep state or the spy state, whatever you want to call it, they really haven't been doing good lately. And it sounds like, to me, an uneducated white male who's never served in the military or been a spy or done anything cool like that, I think they're full of hot air, and they know that pushing pro-war tensions is good because it ignores the populace of the West from inflation, from the mandates, from gas prices, durka. Anyway, Moscow denies it has any plans to invade, and this week announced a pullback of some forces and weapons. While details are scarce and the withdrawal is only partial, the Russian statements have lowered the political temperature following weeks of escalating tension. I also got to give a shout out to Macron, the French president, for actually going over there and meeting with Putin and the Ukrainian president, Zelensky, I think his name is. To my knowledge, he's the only Western president of a nation to actually go and sit down, and he came out hopeful. He said that, okay, we can do this, and I think that actually helped quell some of the concerns. But then you looked at the U.S. media. Nope, World War III is going to happen any second. You fucking mooks. Russian Defense Ministry video showed a trainload of armored vehicles moving across a bridge away from Crimea, the Black Sea Peninsula that Russia annexed from Ukraine in 2014. It also announced that more tank units of the Western Military District were being loaded on trains to move back to their permanent bases after training exercises. But at the same time, Russia is continuing war games near Ukraine's border and across its vast territory. The U.S. and Europe are maintaining threats of harsh sanctions. Trust between East and West remain elusive. Russia and China, they're commie lovers there, they do not want the West to encroach on their borders. So you build up a bunch of troops on your border and you let Ukraine know, hey, if you get pro-NATO, pro-United Nations, pro-West, whatever you want to say it, there's going to be some issues. What I think a good resolution would do was that Ukraine and Russia, and you could throw in France, you could throw in Germany, you could throw in any Eastern European NATO allies that border Russia along with the Ukraine, to say, hey, this is as far as NATO's reach will go. Ukraine will not do anything to further the diplomacy push into Russia. And to us, that may be, well, don't you want Russia to have freedom like we do? Yeah, but it's not going to happen this way, you dumb fucks. What you have to do is meet them halfway. Have an agreement that the whole world can follow. Well, at least say they're following, and then behind the scenes, who knows what they're doing. But it's certainly better than having all this tension and buildup and misinformation getting thrown around so that people starts frothing at the mouth, and anything that's bad starts yelling, the Russians did it, the Chinese did it. I mean, it's crazy. We need to settle down. Russia is what? Not even a top 10 economy in the world. Now, true, you can't really believe Russia's estimates about their military, because why would they tell the truth? Same thing with China. Whenever you hear how bad and bloated and insanely high the military budget in this country is, which I agree with it is, and saying that, well, it's 100 times more than what the Russians and Chinese have. By the way, I just made that statement up, but you know what I'm talking about. You can't really make that argument because you just don't know how accurate the financials and the troop numbers are in communist countries like China and Russia, because they're gonna lie, whereas we don't lie about those things. Huh. Russian parliament asks Putin to recognize the breakaway from the Ukrainian region. Russia lower house of parliament passed a resolution Tuesday asking Putin to recognize the Russian-backed Ukrainian separatist region of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent. The resolution, if adopted, would be a major blow to measures known as the Minsk Accords that were adopted in 2014 and 15 to stop fighting in eastern Ukraine, and could deepen the standoff between Russia and the West over Moscow's military buildup near Ukraine. Lovely. Putin confirms partial withdrawal of troops, but signals the threat is not over. He confirmed Tuesday that he had decided to withdraw some troops from the border with Ukraine and was prepared to re-enter security negotiations with the US and NATO. That's a big deal. The partial pullback marks the first sign of de-escalation since Russia began its massive military mobilization near Ukraine late last year. But Putin also made clear the threat is not over. New GOP bill targets Russian oligarchs with pre-invasion sanctions. Now here's what we're talking. This is one of the rare times I will agree with the Republican Party. 32 Republican senators introduced a bill on Tuesday that would impose immediate sanctions on no fewer than 15 Russian oligarchs and members of Vladimir Putin's inner circle, regardless of whether Russia invades Ukraine. Applaud. This is what I'm talking about. You can't just give blanket sanctions on a country like Russia. It'll just starve and kill the populace. What you need is to direct those sanctions smartly, and this is what they did. Hit them where it hurts. Their fucking money. And anyone who says that they're a friend of Vladimir Putin and means it, you gotta hit them in the dick too. Why does this matter? Anti-kleptocracy activists, if you don't know what anti-kleptocracy means, look it up, have long called on the U.S. to do more to target Russian oligarchs who exploit Western financial systems to hide their stolen wealth. Senate Foreign Relations Ranking Member Jim Risch, a Republican from Idaho, is the lead sponsor of the bill, said a preemptive sanctions would ensure Putin pays a price now for hybrid attacks already launched. The introduction of the bill comes as bipartisan negotiations on a broader sanctions package have stalled in the Senate, in part due to disagreements over when sanctions should be imposed and certain provisions that could affect European allies. In addition to the immediate costs on Putin's cronies, Risch Never Yielding Europe's Territory Act, wow, it's called NYET. Jesus Christ, what a fucking dork! He calls the bill a NYET, N-Y-E-T. I have to give him credit. That is trolling at a higher plane of existence. Never Yielding Europe's Territory, NYET, would impose a cascade of financial sanctions on Russia's banks as well as other entities that knowingly engage with them in the event that Russia further invades Ukraine. The bill would also mandate sanctions on Nord Stream 2, which has long been a headache for the Biden administration if Russia invades Ukraine or the German government allows the pipeline to be certified. Again, all of this is over a goddamn oil pipeline. Outside of sanctions, the bill would authorize an additional $500 million in security assistance for Ukraine, create a lend-lease program, and establish a Ukraine Resistance Fund as a policy framework for post-invasion U.S. assistance. Sanctions would be triggered if the president determines, well, that's scary. I don't want Biden to determine anything that deals with foreign policy. Sanctions would be triggered if the president determines that Russia has escalated its aggression towards Ukraine, including through offensive cyber operations with the aim of toppling the government in Kiev or undermining Ukrainian sovereignty. Giving President Biden the power to determine the threshold for sanctions is a compromise by Republicans. I'd say so. But the bill allows any chairman or ranking member of a national security committee to request a determination within 15 days. If Biden fails to act on the request, sanctions would automatically be imposed within the 15 days. Senate Foreign Relations Chairman Bob Menendez, Democrat from New Jersey, blasted the Republican bill on Tuesday as partisan posturing. Well, fix it then. How about you and the other jabroni, Risch, sit down and figure it out together, you jabronis? The latest proposal by Republicans is largely a reflection of what Democrats had already agreed to in our ongoing conversations, building off of the mother of all sanctions we initially proposed. Yeah, but is it called NIET? You fanoke? I didn't think so. A partisan victory is not worth a message of division from Washington, which only benefits Putin. Well, sit down and talk, you two idiots. It is highly unlikely the Senate will be able to reach an agreement on anything other than a symbolic statement of support for Ukraine before recess begins next week. And you wonder why people are protesting. Nothing can get done. Nothing got done under Trump. We got Biden. We gave the Democrats the House and the Senate, and still nothing can get done. Jesus Christ. Risch told reporters on Tuesday that he believes his bill will be very popular on both sides of the aisle if Russia proceeds with the invasion. As of now, the Biden administration continues to oppose several of its key provisions, including sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 that are not tied to any potential invasion. Well, yeah, because they want that shit to go down. Jesus Christ. Oil, oil, oil. Biden says U.S. has not verified Russian troop pullback. Well, no wonder, because you don't want to verify it, probably. NATO sees no sign of Russia's troop withdrawal near Ukraine. Now, this is discouraging. NATO has not seen signs of Russian troops pulling back near Ukraine, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said Wednesday after Moscow had announced that it was returning some troops and weapons to their permanent bases. Stoltenberg said that Russia is instead continuing its military buildup near Ukraine's border, echoing similar skepticism conveyed by President Biden. Jesus. We have not seen any withdrawal of Russian forces. We have not seen any de-escalation on the ground. On the contrary, it appears that Russia continues the military buildup. We are ready to sit down and discuss with them, but at the same time, we are prepared for the worst. Good God. You don't know what to believe. You don't know what to believe. I choose to believe in the country that this whole fiasco is revolving around, which is Ukraine. True, the president is a former comedian, but that just means I like him even more. He made a joke over the weekend and it crashed the U.S. stock market. You gotta respect that kind of power and trolling. He later apologized. Stock market shot back up. But if the stock market is that flammable by making one joke by someone's head of state, how secure is it really? I mean, come on. I know I got money in the stock market, but good God, if all it takes is a Ukrainian president to make one offhanded joke and it all tanks, what kind of security is that, bozos? I still don't think Russia's going to do jack shit. Like the Ukrainian president said a couple weeks ago, the troop buildup is nothing new. This happened in 2012 and 2014, and the media coverage now is completely different than how it was then. Now it's all misinformation, adding fuel to the fire, just spreading division, just spreading panic. The sky is falling, as that little bitch Chicken Little said. So I would recommend take a deep breath, pick your sources where you get the news, and just use common sense. But anyway, let's move on to some personal stuff. So like I mentioned earlier, this past weekend and Valentine's Day were pretty tough, which is sucky at a whole other level because the actual weekend itself was a blast. But I had family shit hanging over me, I had lady friend issues hanging over me, and I had Valentine's Day hanging over me. So let's rewind a little bit. For the last 2 weeks, the lady friend that I've been seeing, that I've been calling Kiwi on this podcast, we've been seeing each other for the better part of almost 3 months, I would say, maybe even longer. I don't really remember. We're having a good time, but there just isn't that next level of relationship attractiveness, if that makes any sense. The basics are there. I find her attractive. I like her personality. We like the same things on the surface, meaning movies, TV, music, the same kind of stuff. But once you get to that second level, that deeper understanding of people, you get to know their ideologies, their religion, their emotional outlook on things, their 5-year plan, 10-year plan, whether or not they want to have kids, all the important foundation building aspects of a relationship. And it just wasn't there with Kiwi. But I believe in complete honesty. So we've been talking about the relationship, how we both are feeling. Now, she is a little younger than me, and that's being polite. She's actually a lot younger than me. But basically, we're looking for the different things in life. What she's looking for is something that I remember looking for when I was her age. However, that's not what I'm looking for anymore. I'm 35 years old. I'm trying to settle down. I'm trying to find that quote-unquote the one, the partner that I can take my life to that next level. I do want a family. I do want a marriage. I do want kids. I want to fill in this house. You know what I'm saying? And I just wasn't feeling it with her, and she is having her own internal issues going on, and I was helping her through as best I could, as she was helping me with some of my issues. But it just came to a point in time that we had to be realistic and say, should we even keep seeing each other? And that was kind of hanging over the weekend. I was planning on a Valentine's Day event. I actually was planning on it last week, but we were supposed to hang out, and then she canceled, and I said, okay, about the next day, and she said, well, I have plans, and that's kind of when I knew the ending was near, because we were seeing each other at least twice a week, and last week we saw each other just once in the beginning of the week. So I had Valentine's Day planned, a gift and a little fun, event and whatnot, and when she canceled, I thought, okay, the writing's on the wall here. So the text messaging and the chatting was kind of go less and less and less, but I put it out of my mind. I went out with some friends on Saturday. I had a blast. We had a fajita night, which I've talked about before on this podcast. A group of guys get together. We talk shit. We get high. We get drunk. We watch movies, listen to music, watch UFC, play Frisbee. Just fuck around. Fun times. That's what we did all Saturday. We played Frisbee out in the Covington Park, which was just beautiful. It's a new park. The weather was nice. We played for a couple hours. Then we went to my buddy's house. We had the fajita night. And I was back home by 11:30, and I was recovering all Sunday and all Monday for the most part. But then Sunday came along, and which was the Super Bowl, and I saw it with a group of friends from the day before. Not the outcome I wanted. It was a great game. I was pulling for Cincinnati, but Cincinnati was having some weird play calling, especially going for it on 4th down in the first quarter on the 50, and they did not get it. And then, just fast forward to the very ending of the game, the Rams scored. Cooper Kupp is a man among men. All Cincinnati had to do was drive down the field, kick a field goal to go to overtime, or get that touchdown and win it all, baby. And they were driving. But, surprisingly, on 3rd and 1, they ran it with their power back, Samaje Perrin, I think his name is, and he got stopped. And then it was 4th and 1. And instead of switching out running backs and getting their number one running back in, Joe Mixon, they stay on the field with Perrin, and you think, well, surely it's 4th and 1 in the Super Bowl, 4th quarter, under 2 minutes, they're down by 3, and they're just barely at midfield. Surely they will run it here, either a quarterback sneak or a quarterback draw, or they have one of the best running backs in the game in Joe Mixon. But those idiot Bengals called a pass on 4th and 1, and Aaron Donald, within, a millisecond, was on Burrow. Burrow had to scramble and throw the ball away, and that was the game. And you watch the replay, Joe Burrow did have, what's that rookie's name that he played with at LSU? Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase was wide open for the game-winning touchdown, but Burrow needed maybe 2 seconds to throw that ball, maybe 3, and that Rams defensive line was punishing that Cincinnati Bengals offensive line that entire second half, and Burrow didn't stand a chance. I hate the play call. However, I can't get too mad about it because the Rams, they're not one of my favorite teams. In fact, I really don't even like them all that much. But I got to give respect to Matt Stafford, to Cooper Kupp, and Aaron Donald, and Sean McVay. It was a great game. Not as good as the playoffs were, by the way. The previous couple of weeks, those games were wild. The conference championship games and the divisional round games were amazing. Some of the best games I've ever seen in football history. And the Super Bowl was a pretty decent game. It was not a blowout, which the last couple Super Bowls have been blowouts and just boring games. But this game was good. Just a pretty entertaining, fun game. The halftime show was probably one of the better halftime shows in recent memory. Probably because it's all music from my generation. And I love seeing all of my late 90s, early 2000s rap and hip hop stars coming back. Plus Kendrick Lamar, and he did pretty good too. So great halftime show. God bless Mary J. Blige's thighs. Good gravy. She's still looking good. I don't know how 50 Cent wasn't bleeding out of his ears when he was hanging upside down and rapping for that whole time. But hey, the game was a blast. I had a great weekend with friends. But like I was saying, that entire time, I had Kiwi stuff hanging over me. And not to mention, I have family stuff going on constantly. And I'm kind of the go-between between a lot of people because a lot of my older family, they have no children. So I have 2 aunts and 2 uncles in 2 separate hospitals. I have an uncle that looks like he's going to join them any day now. My mom herself can barely walk around much anymore. And my father, physically, he's getting around a lot easier, but I can just tell, and there's a mental decline, there's a speech decline, he's getting tired, and he's getting angry more and more, which is saying something, because I didn't think my dad could get any short of a fuse, but good God. So I had all that shit hanging over me as well, because, it's stressful when I talk to my parents or I read the family emails, and it's just doom and gloom and injuries and COVID and heart attacks and possible cancers and just delusions with some of these older people. I mean, they really just do not take care of themselves or their loved ones, and then they expect all help and assistance. It was just kind of a tough time. So Monday was Valentine's Day. And, let me back up a little bit. Sorry. So before the Super Bowl game, I was talking with Kiwi, and we decided to just end it because neither of us were feeling it. We called it quits as I was heading to my Super Bowl party. So lo and behold, I woke up on Valentine's Day, single. I had my Valentine's Day gift for her sitting there, just a box of very nice Belgian, call out, dark chocolates. And it was really good. I had a romantic kind of bath thing planned out. I was going to light some candles, get some wine, bubble bath. It was going to be a fun time. But so that didn't happen. So I was very mopey and a little sad on Monday because of that. And then I talked to my father, and he was just on one, just really belittling and demeaning and just very mean. And all we were trying to do was just have a discussion about things. I don't even remember what it was. I'm sure it was something geopolitical. Who knows? He kept interrupting me, and he was just being a real pile of shit. So I hung up on him. And then my mom called, and she requested $500 from me because she went to the casino and gambled all her money away. That's happened numerous times. And I just was like, I don't want to deal with anything. So I kind of shut everybody off on Valentine's Day. Didn't talk to a lot of friends. I absolutely didn't talk to my family. And I just said, fuck it. After work, I got fucking high. I drank some wine. And I just kind of sat in kind of a mopey, very emotional depression. And video games weren't fun. Music wasn't fun. None of the TV shows and none of the movies were fun. So I kind of just existed. But I kind of made a game plan moving forward because I don't like feeling this way. And I don't like having things hovering over me. I don't want to have that burden on me at all times. So I got a game plan. It's kind of sad, though, because I got to get back on dating apps. And I've been on them the last couple days. And it is a train wreck, to put it mildly. But the future's hopefully bright. I cleared the air with my parents. I'm keeping up with the family stuff. My life is good. I just... I want to find that special someone, that partner, where I can just, be done with it all. I'm done looking at dating apps and hoping that when people tell me who and what they are, that it's real. Because I'm honest, I'm truthful, and I'm vulnerable. I don't play games on these dating apps or on first dates. I don't, because I don't want to fool around. I'm like, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I bring to the table, in my opinion. Do you have the same outlook on this? That's all I want. That's all I want. I don't find I'm too picky. Some of my friends think I am too picky. I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't think I'm that picky. I really don't. I think I cast a very wide net, but I'm also not willing to settle. I'm not willing to put my loneliness as the most important deciding factor in when I'm looking and finding a partner. I don't. I have too many friends and family that made that mistake. They're lonely, they're depressed, and that their biological clock is ticking, and they just latch on to anyone that they can and bring the whole fucking ship down. But anyway, enough about all that. But as they say in Dutch, for my many Belgian listeners,
Het leven is een bitch, dan sterf je, daarom word ik high.
Life's a bitch and then you die. That's why I get high. But anyway, let's continue on here. One last news story caught my eye. The United States is stealing Afghanistan's money. When the Taliban took over Afghanistan in August, Afghanistan's central bank had deposits greater than $7 billion in the New York Federal Reserve. At that time, many observers noted that this gave the Biden administration financial leverage over the new regime. As Afghanistan's humanitarian situation continued to worsen, the awkward question of what the Biden administration would do with those frozen funds persisted. Without recognizing the Taliban as the new rulers, what could the U.S. do with those funds? Those questions have been answered. The White House issued an executive order to preserve certain Afghanistan central bank assets for the people of Afghanistan. The order will take $3.5 billion and use those assets for the benefit of the Afghan people and for Afghanistan's future pending a judicial decision. Sounds like a right thing to do, yeah? Some outlets covered it as such, except the word certain in the previous paragraph is doing a lot of work. It turns out the Biden White House has different plans for the other $3.5 billion. The federal government will seize those assets to compensate a small group of 9/11 victims. And I think at this juncture, it is prudent and important to point out Afghanistan had zero to do with 9/11. Absolutely nothing to do with anything whatsoever leading up to and the execution of 9/11. In fairness to the Biden administration, they are navigating in legal waters not of their own making. In essence, a group of 9/11 families secured a default judgment against the Taliban as a non-sovereign entity a decade ago. At the time, it was viewed as a largely symbolic ruling, especially since Saudi Arabia had everything to do with 9/11, and we're not taking their money. God, no, not our friends, the Saudis. They're such a nice, loving, humanitarian country. After the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan last year, however, the same group of families went after the central bank's assets held in New York. Using some bizarre logic, a federal district court ruled that because the Taliban now controlled Afghanistan, the plaintiffs could go after those frozen assets, even though the U.S. does not recognize the Taliban as the lawful rulers of Afghanistan. In seizing more than 40% of Afghanistan's hard currency reserves, including $500 million of private bank assets required by law to deposit it in the central bank, the U.S. is taking a bad financial situation and making it worse. To the extent that the state was found liable and international law rules on reparations were given attention, reparations should be limited. If ever a case against crippling compensation could be made, it is here. One Afghan American activist told Al Jazeera, what Biden is proposing is not justice for 9/11 families. It is theft of public funds from an impoverished nation already on the brink of famine and starvation brought on by the United States' disastrous withdrawal. It is not politically popular to declare that it is wrong for the federal government to take funds potentially available to the Taliban and give them to the families of those who died on 9/11. Stripped of legalese, Biden is proposing to divert Afghanistan state funds to help grieving citizens. The U.S. poured hundreds of billions of dollars into a fruitless effort at Afghan state building, some Americans will not begrudge clawing some of that taxpayer money back. None of that, however, changes the precedent of this move. The United States government is looting assets legally held by another sovereign government to reward its own citizens. If another country pulled this move, and another country might be tempted to use this case as a precedent, it would be viewed as outright theft. It makes it much easier for other great powers to act in a similarly imperial manner. The short-term implications of U.S. actions will be to free up some funds for humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. The longer-term implication is to give other countries yet another reason to resent and fear the U.S. weaponization of the dollar, because no matter what legal rationale is being provided, the federal government is stealing Afghanistan's money. Now, true, to the average American here, some of this may make sense. However, you are paying back families of 9/11 victims with the people of Afghanistan's money. The people of Afghanistan, the government of Afghanistan, had fucking nothing to do with 9/11. If you want to compensate 9/11 people, get the fucking money from those that started it and created it, Saudi Arabia. But no, this theft of money, billions of dollars, it's a tough pill to swallow, basically allowing the Taliban this much money. However, just think of it logically. Afghanistan is for Afghanistan people. Regardless of the government, that is their money to do what they want with it. Will Al-Qaeda use it for terrorism, or will they steal it in corruption? Well, who knows? Probably, but who knows? It is their money. It belongs to the people. Now, is the Taliban going to use that money to build schools and parks and bridges? I doubt that as well, but I don't know. But we're not even giving them the chance at that. We're taking it and we're stealing it and giving it to families that, I'm sorry, Afghanistan had nothing to do with this. Ugh, it's disgusting. So we're stealing billions of dollars. So you would think that, okay, so we're going to steal almost $4 billion from Afghanistan. What can we do with $4 billion? Can we use it to make our education system better? Can we maybe make Medicare better? Can we make bridges better? Can we do something positive with it? No, we're going to give it to a select people of the 9/11 Family Fund, which, again, I'm not shitting on the 9/11 Family Fund. However, you're giving them money that you're stealing from a nation that had nothing to do with 9/11. But moving on to a happier topic, my favorite country in the world after my own America, Belgium. We're back, baby. Belgium is the latest country to join the 4-day weekend. To enhance the quality of life in Belgium, the European country previously announced that thousands of federal civil servants will no longer have to answer calls or emails from the bosses outside of working hours. Around 65,000 government workers earned the right to disconnect in hopes of leading a better work-life balance. Now, in another employee empowerment policy, workers in Belgium will be entitled to a 4-day work week. The reform package agreed by the country's multi-party coalition government will also give workers the right to turn off work devices and ignore work-related messages after hours without fear of reprisal. Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo told a press conference announcing the reform package. We have experienced 2 difficult years. With this agreement, we set a beacon for an economy that is more innovative, sustainable, and digital. The aim is to be able to make people and businesses stronger. Belgium Labor Minister Pierre-Yves Doman said that the decision resides with the worker. This has to be done at the request of the employee, with the employer giving solid reasons for any refusal. Employees would be able to request a 4-day workweek for a trial 6-month period. If they so desire, they can stay with the shortened workweek or to decide to opt out. The abbreviated workweek is somewhat different compared to what other countries and companies have enacted. The countries and businesses stripped away 1 day of the workweek without making people put in more hours during the other 4 days. Belgium's program would condense the current 5-day week into 4 days. In practice, this means maintaining a 38-hour work week with an additional day off compensating for longer work days. Employees would work longer hours each of the 4 days. In addition to Belgium, here are the other countries that are piloting a 4-day work week: Scotland, Spain, Japan, Iceland, the United Arab Emirates, and many more to come. So, in solidarity with my Belgian comrades, let me say this.
Gefeliciteerd België, dit is geweldig. Kunt u een deel van deze vooruitgang met Amerika delen alstublieft?
Congrats, Belgium. This is awesome. Can you share some of this progress with America, please? I would love to have this here. Can you imagine, America, a 4-day work week? Good God. So instead of working 40 hours, if you were working 38 hours in 4 days, that is what? Roughly 9 hours a day, give or take? So an extra hour a day, and you're giving a 3-day weekend. It'd be cool if you could kind of plan it out. I would take Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday off, but I think this is an amazing breakthrough. I hope other countries follow. We already have a list that are. I wish that a American state would take the precedent here and say, well, let's try it here at the local state level, and if we have success, we can maybe make it a federal law. Who knows? That is a progress model that I'm all for. But anyway, with that, I think we can wrap up here. Well, as I'm recording this, I was sent a little update by the Seattle Times. King County will end COVID vaccine requirements at restaurants, bars, and gyms. This is great news. This is great news for everyone's sanity, their emotional health, and really it's good for small businesses. Restaurants, bars, theaters, gyms in King County will no longer be required to check vaccination status beginning March 1st. What is that, a week and a half away? Let's see. As the country begins to unwind pandemic policies that have been in place for months. From March 1st, businesses will be free to impose their own vaccination requirements if they so choose, but the county-wide requirement will disappear. Since last fall, indoor eateries and cultural and recreational spaces have been required to verify their customers' vaccination status or a negative COVID test as a condition to entry. The policy has also applied to outdoor events with more than 500 people. Our public health experts believe that now is the appropriate time to lift vaccine verification based on high rates of vaccine coverage and the decrease in new cases and hospitalizations across the country, Dow Constantine said Wednesday. We are moving in the right direction and continue taking additional steps towards recovery. Constantine and new Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell also announced that they will begin gradually calling back to the office the thousands of county and city employees who have been working remotely for nearly 2 years. Woo! The counties and much of the nation's COVID transmission rates have fallen sharply in the last few weeks as December's Omicron variant fueled surge has receded. In King County, this is where I live, average daily cases have fallen by more than 82% since peaking in early January, according to county data. Hospitalizations have fallen by more than 62%. The vaccine check policy was originally slated to be re-evaluated March 16th, but is being scrapped a couple of weeks ahead of schedule. Washington, D.C. recently dropped its vaccine requirement for indoor dining. New York State last week dropped its policy that indoor businesses require either masks or vaccinations. New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, and more have all recently eased school mask mandates. Washington Governor Jay Inslee said he expects to announce this week information on when the statewide mask mandate on schools and businesses will end. He has a news conference scheduled for Thursday. Oh, well, let's hope it's going to end here soon. A little over a month ago, hospitals across the state had more than 800 workers isolating and quarantining and unable to work, according to the Washington State Hospital Association. As of early last week, that number has dropped to about 100. Oh, that's awesome. Dr. Jeff Dukin, health officer for public health, Seattle and King County, says that since the vaccine verification policy was announced last fall, more than 250,000 King County residents have gotten vaccinated. More than 87% of King County residents aged 12 and older are fully vaccinated, and more than 95% in that age group have had at least one shot. More than 79% of county residents of all ages are fully vaccinated. And, the county said, the Omicron surge, which led to the highest known infection levels of the pandemic, has likely given some boosted level of community immunity, at least for the short term. God, I wish I got it. I need those antibodies, baby. Still, Dr. Dunchin, whatever his name is, urged continued COVID precautions, including high-quality masks, improvements in indoor air ventilation and filtration, and limiting time in crowded indoor spaces. He urged vaccinations, including booster shots for people who haven't had one. Vaccinations are free and health insurance is not required. But this is a step in the right direction. I agree with everything the doctor said. You want to follow the protocols as best you can. You want to get the booster. You got to get your vaccines. But the way that the numbers go and the way that the hospitalizations are going, this is looking good. I'm hoping now that some form of normalcy, or whatever a new normalcy is going to look like, because I'm fully on board with the newness of life. I just hope it's not a level of life that you will still see people yelling at each other for not wearing masks or social distancing, or, hey bro, let me see your vaccination card, that kind of bullshit. I mean, it's ridiculous. We need something that addresses this divisiveness. We need a politician or a leader or somebody in power to just talk openly about these things. I guess it's me. I guess I'll do it. But anyway, I think we can wrap up here. So, with all that, I hope everyone takes it sleazy. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. And just treat others as you want to be treated. Reach out, touch faith, all that good stuff. One of the best songs ever. But yeah, I'll catch you bitches on the flip side. And yeah, hope everyone had a good Valentine's Day. And what's the upcoming holiday? President's Day or some shit? I don't know. Good luck with all that. So, peace out. Love y'all. Yeah.